So welcome everyone, it's good to see you. So today's topic is softening the heart, softening the mind. And yes, so when we practice meditation in particular, I think it is really, really important to learn how to deal with the various phenomena that arise during the practice. Very often what arises is not so much the problem, is rather how we deal with it, how we receive it. For example, just like an hour ago, we were sitting with our guests and there was quite some noise going on. I'm always welcoming that, actually. If there's noise when you sit in meditation, you can ask yourself, how am I receiving this? How am I dealing with this? So for example, one way of dealing with it might be resisting it mentally, fighting it, complaining about it, getting angry about it. And when you observe what happens when you get angry at something, you're tightening up. Have you seen that? Have you observed that? Or particularly become very tight in the chest, around the heart, tight in the belly. That's what anger does. It makes us super tight, makes the body like a piece of wood. And so quite obviously, holding on to anger is harming the body. It's harmful to the body. It's not only harmful to the body, but it's also harmful to our mind, our mental well-being. And it is harmful to those who surround us. It's like a bit like a fire, which usually tends to spread through our speech and our actions, infecting other people, infecting the world around us, and so forth. So the states that we carry are very, very important. For example, if you carry, let's just stay with this anger. If we carry that anger, we make ourselves sick. We're busy making ourselves sick, while we are internally trying to fight away the apparent enemy, which is out there, in the form of noise, in the form of various disturbances, things you don't like. That would be anger directed towards an outside object. It could also be directed to yourself, right? This is kind of the opposite of a soft heart. Being angry at the various things that you are experiencing within yourself. In other words, resisting your experiences. I think you all have experiences of this kind. When you're sitting in meditation or you're just quiet somewhere and you notice maybe some sadness coming up, what's your first reaction? Maybe there's some discomfort of any sort, some emotional upheaval arising. How do you react to it? Do you give it space, rather? Or do you try to get rid of it? The first instinct always is to get rid of what's uncomfortable, right? If you experience an uncomfortable emotion, you want to get out of it, get away from it. And this kind of resistance makes us even more hard, makes the heart even more tight. So there's this inner conflict then. Here's me, there's an emotion, I'm getting attacked by the emotion, and I need to protect myself from this emotion. How do I get rid of it? How can I, quote-unquote, deal with it? How can I manage it? What should I do with it, to it? And the problem with all these approaches is that they all come from the same place. Non-acceptance of the way it is. You all have emotion. We're emotional beings. We all carry emotion. Is there anyone in the room who has never been angry ever? I think all of us know what anger is, right? All of us know what sadness is. Have you experienced sadness, grief? Have you experienced despair, fear, worry? These are very, very well-known emotions that we all experience. We all hold these emotions on our inside. And they are not really a problem, actually. Anger is not a problem. Grief, despair, fear, worries, all that is not really a problem at all. They're just natural entities, natural energies. Like wind, like trees, like water, like fire, like earth. Just natural energies. So they exist within you too. So I'm always saying that it's not, your anger is not your problem. Your sadness, your grief, your fear is not your problem. The problem is more that you try to get rid of it instead of trying to see it, instead of comprehending it, right? When the Buddha first taught, he taught the so-called Four Noble Truths. And the first of those Four Noble Truths is the Noble Truth of suffering. Dukkha. Dukkha, the word dukkha could be translated as that which is hard to bear. And the advice that comes with this first noble truth, he doesn't just say, and that's suffering, goodbye. He says, so this is suffering, and suffering should be comprehended, should be understood. And that's exactly what we don't do, right? We try to get rid of it rather than being there with it in order to comprehend it. And already that step requires a softening of the heart. You kind of need to let it stay a little bit so you can see it. So for that we need to open up a little bit. Yeah, there is pain. Pain is like this. And yes, I don't want to feel it, but I'm willing to feel it and explore it and understand it so I can properly let go of it and deal with it, rather than having the pain, just suppressing it and having it come back at a later time in my life in a different form. That's what's usually happening. We're not really resolving pain, we are actually just shifting it around. Shifting it around, like having clever ideas about it, or like escaping it, distracting ourselves, avoiding it. Or, numb it with drugs and so forth. And then, of course, it just keeps coming back in some different form all the time. Because your shadows, they follow you all the time. They're always there. And sometimes it just needs a tiny little circumstance, and boop, there it is. It comes up. Your pain. Some people think, no, I'm not suffering. I hear that quite a lot, actually. Many people say, suffering. No, I'm not suffering. It's a very hard word. Yeah, sometimes I'm a bit uncomfortable maybe, but usually no, I'm not suffering. I wouldn't consider myself to be someone that suffers. But suffering exists on a scale. You have very minor suffering, you have major suffering. The Buddha generally enlists 3 types of suffering. The first one just being pain. You're all familiar with that. You would immediately agree that pain is suffering, yes? From the smallest tiny itch to the greatest torment you could imagine, that is all suffering. It's discomfort. And that might not only be physical pain, by the way, it might also be emotional pain. Someone disagreeing with you. And so we carry latent pain, for example, in the form of I'm a vegetarian. That is latent pain that just simply waits to be addressed. It's like trouble waiting to happen. You're walking around, it's just like a bow and arrow, but you're tight, right? So as soon as someone goes to that topic, bam, There is the pain. And immediately we share it with other people also. We share our pain through pain speech, which gets a pain response. It doesn't solve any problem, it just kind of creates more noise. Yes? So we shift the pain from I'm not killing animals towards I'm annoying other people all the time. Don't get me wrong, it's okay to be vegetarian, there's nothing wrong about that. It becomes the trouble if it becomes a painful identity, then here we have trouble. And so like this latent pain that we carry around, we all carry latent pain in some way, so it's just something waiting to happen. Someone pulling your strings and off you go. A nice little example I found is like a seed that's in the ground, just waiting for rain. Sometimes we blame other people. We say, I'm suffering because of him or her, or I'm suffering because of that particular situation. It's not really because of that. It's because there is suffering inside of you, so it can be triggered. The suffering can be activated. The seed can be activated by water. In other words, by circumstance. Sunshine, water, wind. Fertile ground. If you have the same situation, you have a field without any seed. It can rain a lot, there can be sunshine, nothing will grow. It's a barren field. The ground is not fertile. Right? So we're all full of seeds, any kind of seeds. Seeds for kindness, seeds for happiness and joy. You all have your things. If you see something or you remember something in your life, you feel happy. You activate the seed. You're putting water on the seed. It grows a bit. This is really important, the way we direct our attention. I'm saying that because, again, in the First Noble Truth, that's exactly what the Buddha encourages us to do. You direct your attention here. There is suffering. And then give it some space so you can comprehend it. Just learn to be a bit with it. It's good. Suffering is great. It's almost like an alarm clock. It kind of has the function to wake you up. It has the function to make you question your ways. In many ways, yes. For many people, and I think for all people, suffering is what brings them into meditation practice. What brings them into self-reflection and contemplation. What brings them to wisdom. It is their pain. It is the question, do I really have to suffer that way? Is that really necessary? And for some people, they suffer until they find a teacher. So for them, as Eckhart Tolle points out, then suffering serves as a teacher until they find a real teacher. Then the real teacher points you to the end of suffering. Then that becomes the real teacher, the actual insight. Then that you can say you have a true inner teacher. An inner teacher is not some imagined guru that sits in your heart or your intuition or something like that. Intuition is a very high-minded thing. Intuition is not easy to access, I think. Like having a feeling that you want to go somewhere or something like this is not intuition, it's just having a feeling. In my opinion, intuition is something that arises out of complete stillness, out of complete silence, which is hard to access. It requires some work. So anyways, so the Buddha encourages us to see suffering clearly, to comprehend it, to understand it. And understanding it doesn't mean intellectually comprehending it, but really directly seeing it, learning from studying it, seeing its ways. This is in general a bit of a difficult thing for a Western mind, probably also an Eastern mind, I'm not sure about that, yes. But this kind of, we want to understand before we do something. Well, let me read another book so I understand meditation properly so I can start with the practice. And then you read the book and you're kind of like, yeah, maybe I haven't really understood that point yet. Let me Google it. Then you Google it and doesn't really work out. It's total opposite of what you've read in the book. So you say, maybe I should find a teacher. You go to a teacher, and the teacher, you don't agree with the teacher. He says some weird things, oh, forget the book, you should do it like this. And in the end, there's just much more confusion. Nothing has happened yet. So instead of understanding before you do it, the understanding or true understanding, wisdom arises from doing it. So you want to sit down and watch and not run away. Isn't that many people feel that meditation is escapism? While you're sitting around, I'm busy making actual change in the world. I'm going to a protest today, or I'm, whatever it is that you happen to be doing, but I'm making real change in the world. I'm actually helping while you're just sitting around. You're just escaping the problems of the world. Here, read a newspaper. Face reality. Instead of just sitting around doing nothing. Many people have that idea about meditation, meaning you're just sitting around. You're avoiding the world. You're just closing your eyes and your ears and, no, I don't want to know anything about politics in the world. It's not like that at all. In fact, it's the total opposite. Meditation is the total opposite of escapism. Most of the time, everything else we're doing is escapism. We're running away from ourselves into endless activities, endless this, endless that, avoiding ourselves, avoiding being with the real problem. Right? What's the real problem? It's my anger, my frustration, my judgmental mind, me hating myself, me hating whatever comes up in my mind. That's the real problem. Imagine I could save the world from that. From my own anger, my own outrage, my own offense. That would be a bit less problem, right? Where I go, there's a bit of a less problem there. Instead of me being a walking problem, wherever I go, that's where trouble ensues. So softening our heart really means, here in the beginning, allowing for suffering to be there long enough so you can understand it. So what do you do practically with that? Well, you sit down and then you get bored. There is some suffering. Suffering of boredom. So what do we usually do? Maybe we change the technique. Maybe I should count instead of just watching the breath. Maybe count the breath. Maybe visualize some light. Yeah, I could visualize some light. That's nice, Instead of actually dealing with the real problem, which is you trying not to feel what you feel. So what I do in my own practice is, if there is something I usually just go back to the breath. Yes? But if there is something that's persistently asking for my attention, then I open up to it. There is some pain, for example. And that might be as basic as knee pain. And I just open up to it, I feel it. And I give it a soft space to be there, to exist. I open my heart to it. That also to me implies to be kind to it. To allow it to be there. I think that's the essence of kindness. It is to allow things to be there. For example, to allow another human being to have their opinions is kind. To allow another being even to worry is kind. Or to cry. Or to suffer. Even to allow for that. Instead of immediately saying, shh, stop, don't worry. It'll all be good very soon. Just stop the drama. Would you calm down, please? To give some space for another person to experience what they are obviously experiencing, because these experiences are so worthwhile and so meaningful. A part of life, like death is. Death, what is it? Is a denied part of life. Like, we like birthdays, we don't like death. So we deny it. We want to push it away. Happy birthday, sad death day. They have nothing to do with one another. One is good, one is bad. Let's get more of this one, less of that. Illness is somehow wrong. You shouldn't have it. What's wrong with you? But illness is such a normal thing, isn't it? We all have it. Unhappiness, just being grumpy. It's normal. I love that about the Thai masters. It's normal. Mantamada. It's normal. Oh, I'm so angry. Oh yeah, that's normal. Anger is normal. What do we think sometimes? Like we shouldn't be angry, or we should be always happy. You shouldn't be sad. In the DSM, the guide for psychotherapists, psychologists, they tell them what kind of drugs to use in what cases. They say, for example, that if you grieve longer than 2 weeks, you have a case of depression, which should be treated with medication. I'm not kidding you, this is serious stuff. This is how they need to measure in order to prescribe something. I know it's very slippery terrain there, because you have to somehow define it so you can sell drugs in a certain way. I'm not saying that this is necessarily bad. It's just, it's all we can muster at the moment, it seems. And it's a system that somehow works in some ways. So it stays in place. But we should also question these things, I think. Being curious about how comes. Who says that 2 weeks of grief is enough? After 2 weeks you should be up and happy for it again, How? Aren't there different human beings, different relationships you have? How about when your mom dies, or your father dies, or your children? After 2 weeks, should be treated with medication? I find that questionable. I'd rather would have someone address the root and pay attention to the pain. Because that's what people, they have pain for that. Please pay attention. It's kind of your body's way of even saying, like, here, look here. You practice yoga. Some of you maybe practice yoga. Some people yank their legs into lotus position. Their knees are hurting like crazy. And then 2 months later of yanking, they can't walk anymore properly. They have a proper knee injury. Because we don't listen to the body properly. We want to have it our way, the mind's way. I want to sit in lotus pose. The body says, no lotus pose for you now. Just take it easy and slow. But the mind says, lotus pose now. And then it hurts. And instead of taking a painkiller, maybe it is more advisable to not yank the leg. So to address the cause. What's the cause of your grief? What's the cause of your pain? Why do you feel emotionally imbalanced? You can understand if you look there. If you take the time to feel the pain, so you can understand it, and you become soft. Then the second noble truth is, what's the cause of suffering? It's the cause of suffering. Attachment. Yeah, it's attachment, it's craving. In short, like and dislike, wanting, not wanting. It is when something arises inside of you, immediately relate to it through wanting or not wanting. Either you try to keep it there, thereby disturbing nature, or you try to push it away, thereby disturbing nature. So then, the true meaning of giving something space is a dropping away of craving. It's a dropping away of just constantly controlling something or trying to achieve something. Just opening up to it. It is like this. And the more you look, the more you understand, it's a feeling. It's a feeling in my chest. What is this feeling? Well, it's electricity in my chest. Let's have a look at it, moving. And then you look and look, and all of a sudden you understand where that comes from, or what you need to do with that feeling. And in most cases, it is perfectly enough to receive it with warmth and be really friendly to it. And allow it to be there. And that's when real miracles can actually happen, and physical pain dissolves. Emotional burdens that we have been carrying around for many years just dissolve. They just fall away. How come? Because you finally pay attention. And that's what we mostly haven't done for all these past years, but now we start with it. So now real changes can happen. A real emotional healing can happen. Your mind, your emotional being, your body, your actions, everything becomes more and more aligned because you're fully there. You're devoted to this moment. You don't need to escape it. So that's the third noble truth, is the end of suffering. It's the end of push and pull. The feeling that I must do something to this. I am here, this is mine, this is me, should be, this should not be, let me arrange it, let me fix it. That is stopped. And the path to that is mostly through mindfulness. Just noticing clearly what is happening as it is happening here and now. Clearly comprehending it. And then through that arises right speech, right action, right livelihood, etc., etc. All the limbs of the noble path. But it starts with right view. It starts with proper understanding, opening up to the way it is. That's the most difficult thing. Honestly, I think everything else we're doing is much easier. Rather than just staying there and getting to know ourselves in and out. That's hard. Only very few do it. And those who do, they get the results. And happiness is theirs. A falling away of tension and suffering and problems is theirs. That's an option. You can be at peace, you can be completely relaxed, and that can be your contribution to this world. So that's all that comes to mind for today. Are there any questions?